Looks like that's everybody. Okay. So that's attendance. So, hey, I hope you have been checking your email. I hope you've been kind of paying attention to everything going on. At this point, you probably got a bunch of emails from Don Paul. You probably also have gotten a few emails from me. If you haven't really kept up to date all that, make sure you go to the main page of the course where I've posted a lot of this important information. So you'll see the links to all of our online resources. We've got our YouTube playlist there. We've got a link to our Discord server. All of you are on there, but if you do need to find that again, that is there. And then you want to read through this email from me if you haven't read through it yet. And that'll kind of explain how we're going to do things for the upcoming weeks. I don't know if you saw the notification over the weekend, but at least for St. Louis and Illinois, and we're kind of in a stay-at-home order for the next 30 days. So it's originally the plan was only to be out for maybe 2 weeks. I think there's a very good chance that we'll actually be out longer than that, given the current situation. So you may notice I'm working from home. We moved all of the IT classes. Several of the classes have moved, so the teachers are doing the work from home to try and get a hold of you. I'm trying to keep some social distancing coming up. So this is where I'm at. You can see my art in the background and whatnot. That's the deal. So if you have any questions as we kind of go through things, definitely post them in the YouTube chat. I'll be monitoring that primarily over the Discord chat. The main reason I want you to put it in there is because then it's on the recording later for anybody that misses this session or can't be here for the whole session, which I know at least one person has told me he can't make it for the whole session. So that way it kind of keeps it all in one place. It'll all be in the recording at the end of the day. So any kind of questions as to what the plan is coming up? Graduation, I haven't really heard anything yet. They haven't really said anything yet. I know when H1N1 came through, which is around the time I graduated, we ended up not having it. We ended up having graduation, but no handshakes. So that might be part of it. But I don't really know what graduation's going to look like when it gets there. So that's our classes end, I think, officially around May 6th. So that's a few months out. It may be that things are back to normal by then, and it may mean that we have that regular graduation happens as regular. But we really don't know that yet. I haven't heard. As far as the job fair goes, I'm going to assume that that's probably going to be canceled. But again, there's no official word that's gone out about it yet. Worst case scenario, we have a ceremony on a Minecraft server. That would be hilarious. So as far as the semester being extended, it is not. So we still have to pack it in to the same amount of time. It's still going to end at May 6th, even with the extra week of spring break. So we're still going to have to kind of cram that in. We've got essentially 1 week less in the semester than we had previously. So we still got to kind of work in that same measure. That's just going to mean things like Firebase we won't really have a lot of time to talk about, which I hadn't really made any material for yet. So that is what it is. I think I've gotten your first drafts from a few people. I still need it from a few more people. Make sure you get that to me by the end of the day so we can start reviewing those. Also, where was I going with that? Also, I've posted like the requirements for the second draft and more requirements for the final up on Inside Rankin. So if you go to, say, coursework, you can go down to the bottom. You'll see that there's an assignment for the second draft. the final version of that proposal, as well as the application, the presentation. I'm still expecting us to have a presentation even if we don't meet live. So if we do need to do digital presentations, we'll probably do those through a Discord stream, but we'll play that by ear depending on what we kind of find out. But I do plan to still have a presentation even if it's digitally at the end. Yeah. So graduation, I don't know. Job fair, I don't know. But I assume that something's going to change on both of those fronts. Okay. I think that's everything that everybody was asking about there. It's kind of weird being here and not hearing your voices at the moment, but I guess I'll have to get over that. So on the schedule for today, going back to the main page, our plan for this week is I'm going to go through lessons 8.1 and lessons 8.3. So lessons 8.1 is what we're going to cover today. It's about notifications. 8.3 is then about using something called Job Scheduler, which usually goes pretty hand in hand with notifications, where you want to say, okay, well, usually a notification comes in when you say, hey, there's a new post on Facebook, there's a new post in a chat room, or there's a new post on wherever, there's a new recipe posted on your recipe website, there's a new restaurant open on your yada yada. So notifications come a lot kind of together with Job Scheduler a lot. I did mention in one email that we're going to skip over lesson 7.4, which covers services, and we're going to skip over lessons 8.2, which covers the alarm manager. The reason being for that, both of those used to be an important part of how we used to do notifications and how we used to do background tasks. But with Job Scheduler and all the changes that Android's made in versions 26, 28, 29, all the changes that they made to background services has meant that those really aren't the right way to do that anymore. So we're going to kind of skip over the alarm manager, because the better tool to use now is Job Scheduler to do really what we would have done through an alarm manager, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's kind of the intro as far as where we're at with things. So today I want to go over the slides for 8.1, and then I'm going to ask you, when we finish the stream, to start on the labs for 8.1. I have posted, because there's a few things in there that I kind of noticed going through the labs. So I have posted the finished version of both the Notify Me app, which is 8.1, as well as the finished app for 8.3. Those are both posted to Inside Rankin under your Lesson 8 labs, so you can see that once you finish it. But please go through it yourself, finish all the tasks, and then take a look at what I've kind of posted up there, and you kind of see how I might move things around, and we'll probably talk about that at some point this week. So in that process, also, because we're skipping some of that, we're skipping 8.2, skipping 7.4, we really want to focus more on 8.3, spend some more time doing some actual practical labs. The labs that they give you for kind of 8.1, 8.3, both of those are kind of just to test the waters and try it out, but they're not really strongly correlated to what a real world scenario is, which is why I want to give you a little bit more a few more labs on the Job Scheduler and the notifications, just because there's more to know there's more to do there than just what those labs cover. I hope that makes sense. So to answer your question, that's roughly the same schedule as we've been planning. So today we'll do lecture and then lab after that, and then tomorrow will be entirely lab, and then we'll hit 8.3. I'll do lecture on that on Wednesday. Okay, so let's go. Let me launch this. So I'm going to go into the 8.1 slides. So let's talk about notifications. That's kind of our goal today. So first what we want to talk about is, well, first of all, what are notifications? And then we'll talk a little bit about notification channels, which is a new structure that's kind of introduced in version API 26 or Oreo, that you now can kind of group notifications together. So that's an important thing to do now. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to create notifications. We'll talk about how to set up tap actions, action buttons, expanded views, which is kind of a larger way to see notifications, a different way to lay them out. We'll talk about how to deliver those and how to manage those notifications. So that's kind of all in here today. There are a few things in this lesson that are not covered in your lab or don't necessarily used in your lab. So just be forewarned, be aware of that. There are some things that are important to know from here that maybe lab won't have you walk through, unfortunately. So there's a little bit of maybe disjointedness between that. So at some point I would like to kind of do this. Maybe we need to do some hands-on with the notifications. Maybe we need to do some hands-on with the job scheduler, and we'll kind of play that as ear. So maybe we'll do some. Maybe I'll stream something with the labs tomorrow. Maybe I'll stream something with the job scheduler on Thursday, just to make sure that we have something out there, whether it be pre-recorded or live, that you can watch to kind of get some more idea of how this fits in practically, because it can be hard to kind of see how this works just from the slides. Okay, so first of all, what are notifications? So notifications are messages that are displayed generally outside of your app UI. So everything we've done so far, when we show data, it's all really still part of our app. Even if, all of our controls and our widgets show up on our layouts and on our activities. Well, notifications give us a way to show the users a little bit of data that happens even when they're not inside of our app. And that's really important for things like getting users to come back and use our app and knowing that there's new data, because otherwise they may just forget that they even installed our app. Now, obviously, one thing you need to know, I think I may have mentioned this at some point, you can't really run any code until the user at least runs your app once. So if they install your app but never run your app, you're never going to get notifications from that app. It actually does have to be installed and then run. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You do have to get the user to run your app at least once, otherwise you're not going to be able to send them notifications. So when we're sending out notifications, there's three kind of main parts that show up. We've got the icon, which shows up here on the left. We've got a title that shows up on top. It's kind of a darker color, and then the body text beneath it. Now, the way the notifications show up is really version specific, in some cases manufactured specific. So one phone might show the notifications one way, and another phone might show the notifications another way. There's been kind of a trend lately of moving less towards having icons showing up in those notifications. Traditionally, that was a big part, but they've kind of started moving to let's make more room for the text and start to get rid of some of these icons. So you may not see this icon show up here depending on kind of what version of Android you're running in, but you still have to provide it. Okay. So notifications are used for a wide variety of things. They generally appear as an icon in your status bar. If you've used an Android phone a lot in the past, you're probably familiar with that. There's a little icon that shows up to tell you, hey, there's something for you to look at. Also, potentially, depending on the so-called priority or the importance of the notification, you may see it pop out right when you get it. Otherwise, some notifications that are lower priority will just show that icon, and you won't necessarily know that it's there until you go look at their status bar. So typically, you'll kind of pull down the status bar from the top, and then you'll see all these notifications like so. And then you can the notification drawer, you'll pull that from the top, and you'll kind of see here. On some versions of Android, the other place that notifications can appear, or the user can get notified, can see that they have notifications, is sometimes there'll be a little notification dot on the icon, like you can see here with the mail and this other app. These different apps have a notification pending that the user kind of hasn't looked at yet, or hasn't dismissed. They might have seen it, but they haven't dismissed it. So that appears on some versions of Android. My kind of testing with this, at least on my emulators, I didn't see that notification dot, as well as on my 5.0 tablet that I tested with. I didn't see that notification dot. I don't know if you'll see that with your tablets, your Samsung tablets that you have. So you might try that physically to see if that notification dot appears or not. But at least on my devices, I didn't actually get that notification dot to appear. If that notification dot appears, you're supposed to be able to long press. You can long press that icon and then see the notification from there as well. So that may be another way to see it other than just the navigation drawer. Okay, so starting with historically, all of your notifications were really grouped into one thing, and you really only had the option, as far as apps that you had installed, to either turn notifications on or to turn them off. You could say, I want all of them or I want none of them. And unless the app provided you specific fine-grained control to those notifications, you really didn't get it. So Facebook had some of those. Some of the other more larger apps had some kind of settings to say, I want this notification and maybe not that notification. But large in part, there was nothing that the Android operating system provided for you to say, I want some of the notifications to happen, and I'm interested in these notifications, I'm not interested in those notifications. You also couldn't historically say that these notifications make sound and those notifications don't make sound. They all would behave the same way. So with Android, with Oreo, also API 26. So with Oreo, we can now say, well, these notifications are kind of in this category, have this behavior, and these notifications over in this other category have a different behavior. So some of them, let's say over here, these are maybe lower priority notifications, so you would just get an icon in the status bar and they wouldn't make any noise or vibrate your phone or anything like that, because they don't want to interrupt your flow. Versus other notifications on the other side, we can say, well, these ones are really, really important, so we're going to do everything. We're going to make sound. We're going to make it pop out because we really want you to know about that notification right away. So an example with that, if we think about maybe Yelp, if you got a direct message from somebody, we might call that a high priority notification, and we might make that very loud, as we might say, versus we might say, by the way, on a daily basis, hey, here's the new things that are on Yelp. That might be a lower priority notification. That may be one that user doesn't want a noise or a light or something about that to tell them that it happened right then. Does that make sense? So that's why we're creating these notification channels. Okay. So these notification channels give us user configurable kind of categories to our notifications. We can say what type of notification it is. We can group more than one notification into that particular channel. But we can say, okay, well, this notification is this channel, this notification is that channel, but it's not necessarily one-to-one where every channel only has one type of notification. It may be just kind of a group of notifications. So on a channel-by-channel basis, we can now configure a few things. We can configure whether or not notifications on that channel make sound, whether or not you hear a chime when you get a notification. We can configure whether or not your notification light appears, which exists on some devices, where it'll kind of be a kind of a blinking LED that'll say, hey, here you have something, which is kind of a way to check it without actually looking at the screen. So we can turn that off and on a per channel basis. We can also say, do we want the phone to vibrate? We may have the phone vibrate even if you're on, it may make sound and vibrate. It can actually do both, but we can say that on a per channel by channel basis. It also allows the user a way to mute that channel. So they can say, I want these notifications, but not this channel. I want to turn this channel off, but the other channel's on, which is a really good thing from a user's perspective. Because, well, once you've got a lot of apps installed, you start getting a lot of notifications. So you want to have that more fine-grained. But it's also a good thing from our developer standpoint, because traditionally a user would say, I'm getting too many notifications, I'm going to turn them off completely. And then at that point, you can't send your user any more notifications. And eventually the user is going to forget that they even installed your app and stop using it. So it's nice to be able to give the user that configurability to say, turn off the notifications that they don't really care about, or the notifications that are maybe interrupting their day too much. But still keep some of the notifications so that you still have that engagement and you still can interact with the user without them having turned off all of the notifications. So, as of version 26, when these were introduced, they are now mandatory. Prior to version 26, they didn't exist. They weren't a mandatory thing. Whenever you send a notification, you just said, hey, I'm going to send a notification. But now with API 26, there's two things we have to do. So first of all, before we can send a notification at all, we have to create these channels. Okay, so we have to create these channels when our application starts. Go ahead and get them ready. And then when we actually send the notification, we have to say this notification belongs to this channel. Every channel will have a channel ID, which is a string in this case. So that's how we kind of determine where the notifications go, is based on the channel ID. Okay. Now, if you're looking at this in terms of kind of how do you know whether you need those notification channels? How do you know that you have to implement that? So if I look at the Gradle for my app, okay, there's a few important settings that we want to kind of look here. So we've got the compile SDK version, we've got the minimum SDK version, we've got the target version. Okay, so the minimum is the lowest version that I can run on. Okay, so as long as this target and this compile, as long as both of those are less than 26, notification channels are not required. Okay, but as soon as you move your target and your compile up to 26 or higher, that includes exactly 26 or higher, then you have to use notification channels. Okay, at that point you don't have a choice. So that means that for all the apps that we do here, all the apps that we work with notification channels, I'm going to expect that we're creating here for this course, I'm going to expect you to have those channels in there. But if you were to work for a company that had maybe an older app and they're deciding not to target 26 and higher for whatever reason, then notification channels aren't necessarily required. But the way that works is if this is, say, again, if this is 25, then all of those notifications will appear in one channel. They'll all be grouped into one channel as far as newer devices are concerned. Okay, but the expectation for this class is that we're going to need to do notification channels for any app we create with notifications. Okay. So the way that you configure those notifications in your device, once you've installed the app, once you've run it, once the app's actually created the channels, you're going to be able to go into settings on your device and then configure those notification channels. So if I look for that here, I'm going to go home. I'm going to look for that on my emulator. So I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to go to apps and notifications. I'm going to go into the Notify Me app. And I'm going to go click here on notifications. Okay. So in here, I'll see all of the categories that have been all the channels that have been created for my app. So on some versions of Android, this will be labeled as categories. That's how the Android operating system labels them for users, even though from a developer standpoint, we call them channels. But for the user perspective, they're called groups. So in here, I can say, well, let's turn off all notifications for the app. That's as simple as that. I say, okay, I don't want to get notifications from the app at all. I can do that. If I want to say I only want to do it on a per channel basis, I can uncheck and check a channel like that. Anything that's unchecked, I don't get any notifications for. The code will still, in my app, will say send a notification, but I just won't see it. Okay, so the user does have that option. Also, if I click on the individual channel, again, going here, clicking on the individual channel, I can change the behavior of that channel. So let's say I want to change it here. Okay, I've got a few different options. I can say, okay, make it, if I want it to be, I really care about that notification, I can say make it sound and pop on screen. Or I could say, well, don't pop on screen, but just show me sound, or show it silently. I don't want to hear any sound, or make it small. So there's a few different kind of settings that the user can pick for how important that notification is to them and how much of an interruption would they like. So if I put it up here, this will kind of be the maximum interruption. Now, I've got some additional settings I can set down here. So for instance, I can change the sound that notification makes. So I can say, for instance, let me go look here. So I could say none if I don't want to make it any sound. I can pick from a few different notification sounds to say, okay, well, I want this app to make they sound this way, and I want another app to sound this way. Or I could even say, you know, these kinds of notifications I want this way, these kind of notifications I want that way. That can be a really useful tool for the user. The nice thing is that they get this whole drop down without us really having to do much. They can pick that sound. We just have to say, hey, here's my notification channel, and group things appropriately to kind of give the user that configurability. Okay, so I can change that sound. If I just leave it up default, that's just going to go off the system-wide setting for notifications. Okay, so that's that. I can also in here override do not disturb. If you put your phone in do not disturb mode, you're basically saying I don't want to get notifications right now. I'm busy doing something. So that's what that's in regard to. Okay, so those are the settings that the user has on a per category or a per channel basis. Okay, now one of the things you need to know, until your app has created the channel, they won't appear here. You have to actually create the channel in code before it shows up here. So what that means in practice is we want to make sure that as soon as our app starts that first time, we want to go ahead and create all the channels. We don't want to wait until I send a notification to create that channel, because then the user is not able to configure it until they see the channel. So we want to make sure that we create all of those at the beginning. Okay, and we'll talk about how to do that. One way to do that is by creating the channels in the main activity, the first activity that they see. The other way, which I'd kind of recommend, is using something called the application object, which we haven't used yet, but the application object gives us a way to make sure that certain code happens at the beginning when they start the app. So to create a notification channel, here's kind of the code that we need to write. So first thing we need to do is we need to construct a notification channel object. That constructor takes a few things. It first of all takes a channel ID, which we're typically going to put into some sort of constant. Now, this particular channel ID is a string. Most of the IDs we see when we're working with Android, a lot of them are going to be integers. This is one kind of exception to the rule where the channel ID is actually a string. Okay, so we've got the channel ID, we've got the channel name, and they also have this importance level. Okay, the importance level says how important is this notification, which kind of sets the default behavior for sound, lights, vibration, whether or not it pops up immediately when the user sees it. So that's kind of what that means. Okay, so that importance level is an integer. It's something that we have as a few different constants in the notification manager, which specifies how important it is. We'll look at that in a table in a minute. This channel name, note that this is user friendly, so this is user visible, so this is something you want to put in your strings.xml. It's not something you want to just hard code the string there. You want to actually have that from a string resource because the user is going to see it. So we create the notification channel object, and then we're going to use the notification manager. We're going to say create the notification channel. And we haven't looked at how to get the notification manager yet. We'll come back to that. But we need that object to actually create the channel. Okay, so we're going to say create notification channel. That's going to actually create it. Now, one thing to know, once I've created that channel, it actually is there forever. As long as the user has the app installed, that notification channel will be there. So the first time I call create notification channel, it will actually go through the process of creating the channel. Any times in the future where I say create notification channel, it actually won't do anything. It'll just keep the existing configuration of that channel that the user specified. Okay. So only that first call to it really makes any difference. Any future calls to create notification channel really have no effect. Just checking that everybody's here. I know that it's been a while since I asked for questions, but I would ask, does anybody have questions at this point with where we're at with the notification channels especially? So once we've said create channel, and that's the end of when we can modify the channel. If we say we create notification channel this call, once that's been made, any changes that we made to the object have no effect. Yes, we won't actually use context compat, but there are some compatibility classes that we need to use. So you'll see when we build the notifications, we'll use a notification compat class. That's really the only compatibility class that we have to use is the notification compat class. Yeah, so that's one thing to keep straight, is if you say that your channel this is a high priority channel, you can't then later decide that it's a low priority channel in even a newer version of your app. So you do want to get those priorities and the importances right the first time. So talking about importance levels. So important levels are used in API 26 or higher. They set how intrusive and how visible each of your channels or your notifications are going to be. So anything that is posted to that channel follows the rules of that channel. The range of importance is from importance none, you'll want to use the constants, but that one's 0, up to importance high, which is 4. So there's 5 different levels, from low importance notifications to high importance notifications. If we're working with Android devices lower than 26, it'll go off of something called the priority, the notification priority, instead of the importance. So that's where we're going to use the compatibility classes to kind of navigate that. But what that means is really we need to always set both things. We're going to set the importance for newer devices, and we're going to set the priority for lower devices. Okay. So the priority basically does the same thing as the importance, but the priority is on a per notification level, versus the importance is on a per channel level. So where you set the importance versus you set the priority is going to be 2 different places. So we're going to set the importance when we create the channel. We're going to set the priority when we create the notification. So for that, we're gonna call the set priority method. We're gonna pass in one of these constants. So for instance, we have the importance constants, which are on the notification manager object, and we have the priority constants, which are on the notification compat class. Now, to kind of map up what those importance and priorities mean, so on the left, you see there's kind of these groupings, these more general groupings. We say we've got urgent notifications, high notifications, medium notifications, and low notifications. So if it's up on the urgent side, we're saying this is a really, really important notification. You should look at this right now. The next level down there, it's like, well, maybe it's not that important, but so it's going to make sound, but it's not going to pop up in front of the user. The next level beneath that is our medium, where it doesn't pop up. It's just a little icon in your status bar. It doesn't make sound. And then at the lowest level, it doesn't make sound, and it doesn't even show an icon in your status bar. So for a low level notification, a low importance notification, you're only going to see that if you pull down the notification drawer. It's probably very rare that you're going to send out a low priority low level sort of notification, because you've kind of at that point missed the kind of reason we send out notifications. So most of the notifications we send out are going to either be in this urgent or the high categories, because the whole point of sending it out is we want to bring the user's attention to something. We want them to get back into using our application. So most of the notifications we send out are going to be in one of those 2 sort of priorities. Okay, so for newer versions of Android 8.0 or higher, or below that, you've got the different constants. So here, this is importance high. Default is going to be, this is high is going to be our urgent. Default is our high. Low is medium. Minimum is low. And then you'll see the same similar constants over on the priority side. So if we set the channel to, say, importance high, then we also want to set the notification to priority high. If we set the channel to importance default, we also want to set the notification to priority default. So that's how those match up. You're going to use one constant when you create the channel, and you're going to use the other constant when the priority constant when we create the notification. This table, by the way, is in the concepts chapter. If you read through that, you'll find this table in there. You can refer to it, or you can come back to the slides and look at it here. So we've talked about how to create channels and what those channels are. The next thing we want to talk about is how to create the actual notifications that we're going to then post or send in those channels. Okay. So to create a notification, we first need to create a notification.compat.builder class. And we need to give that 2 things. We need to give it first the application context. We also need to give that the ID of the channel. Now remember, the ID of the channel is a string. Okay, we want to make sure this is a constant because obviously you see we create the channel, we also create the notifications. These are hardly ever going to be in the same method, and oftentimes they're even in separate classes. So we really want to make sure that we make this channel ID a constant of some sort so I can access it across multiple classes anywhere where I need it, so that we don't have a problem of like, hey, I changed it here, but I didn't change it over here. So you want to make sure that your channel ID is always in a constant. Okay, so we've got this, this is the application context here, and then we've got the ID of the channel. This ID of the channel, we'll always provide this regardless of what version of Android we're running. But on lower versions, say API 25 and below, it's just going to ignore that channel ID. So we provide it all the time, but this notification compat builder goes ahead and take care of those differences between 26 and before 26. Okay. So once we've created that builder, we also need to give it a few things. So we kind of talked about previously what the parts of a notification are. The main three parts that we have, again, are the icon, when we've got the title, and then we've got the text, the body text. So to set the icon, we'll call set small icon on that builder. To set the title, we need to call set content title, and then set content text to set the actual body text of that notification. Okay. The icon is always required. And regardless of what version of Android you're running, you always have to set an icon on your notification. If you don't set an icon on your notification, when you then try to send it, it's going to give you an exception, it's going to give you an error, and it's not going to show that notification. So you always have to provide an icon for your notifications. Okay, so you're going to provide an icon, we're going to provide a title, and we're going to provide text. The way that kind of works out in code is we're going to say, okay, let's create this new builder. I'm giving it the application context and the ID of the channel. We're going to then say we'll set the icon. We'll use an icon resource. There should actually be a semicolon here and a semicolon there. So we're going to set the icon, and we're going to set the title, and then we'd set the text. Again, because these two things are user visible, usually you're going to call getString there to go get it from your strings.xml to make sure that it gets translated. So both of these calls, rather than directly putting the text, you generally want to call getString and get a string resource for both of those things, both the title and the text. So that's the basic kind of way you build up that notification. So you're going to say builder, create the new builder, call all your setters to set the different properties of the notification, and then at the end of that we'll come back and we'll talk about how to send that notification, because at this point I've created the builder, but I haven't actually sent it. Okay, so the user's not actually going to see it if I just stop here. Now before we get to how to build it, how to send it, we want to talk about some of the more additional properties that we can set on a notification. So one of those things is actions. So typically when you have a notification appear, the user should be able to tap on that notification and then something's going to happen. And in some cases there may also be additional buttons on there, additional actions that they can do through that notification. Okay, so the default tap notification we set through set content intent. Okay, set content intent is what is going to happen, the intent that it's going to fire when the user just taps on the notification regularly. Okay, now usually that means launching an activity in our app. It doesn't have to be, it can be a lot of things, but typically that intent that we give it is going to be, say, launch main activity, or launch the view message, view email activity, to kind of look at the content of what's in there. So we create an intent object which is going to be fired when the user taps on it. However, in order to actually set this up, I need to not just give it an intent object, I actually have to give it a pending intent object. So a pending intent object is this wrapper that we put around an intent, and the whole point of it is it lets other apps send that intent. Typically an intent we can only send ourselves, but if we want to say, here, Android operating system, you can call this intent, you can send this intent at a later time, we need to actually give it as a pending intent. So set content intent only takes a pending intent. It does not take an intent. Okay. So that's my default action. My default action is through set content intent. I can set additional actions which should appear like here. So here there's a reply button. I could also say maybe put a block button or other things in here, but here we have a reply button. The way I'm going to add that is I'm going to add that through the add action method on the builder. So I'm going to say add action, I'm going to give it a pending intent. So whether it's tapping on the action on the notification here or tapping on one of the buttons, it needs to be a pending intent is what we use to kind of respond to that tap. So we can't give it like a click listener. We can't give it just here, run this function when this happens. It has to be a pending intent, which again means that it needs to be an intent. So those action buttons are kind of additional. Starting with Android 7.0, these additional action buttons were added. Anything pre 7.0, any of those devices that are pre 7.0 do not have these additional action buttons. So one of the things that means is if you have functionality that's in these action buttons, it needs to not be just in that action button. There needs to be another way for the user to do it. And that's generally considered good practice even on the newer devices that have it. So the expectation is if you have, say, a reply button there or a block button or a trash button, when they click on that notification regularly up here, whatever screen that sends them to, they should be able to do on that screen anything that's actually in these action buttons here as well. So that's something to keep in mind from kind of a design guideline. Anything you have in these action buttons should also be on the screen where you're going to take them to when you click that. Okay. So a pending intent, I kind of started talking about already, but it's kind of as they say, a description of an intent and target action that we want to do. So we use this pending intent, again, to allow another application, specifically in this case the Android operating system, to issue an intent as if they were us, as if they were our app. So that's kind of from a security sort of perspective. They can now issue that notification as they were us. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. Now, to create that pending intent, there's 3 different factoring methods we can use. All 3 of these are static methods. So we can say pending intent.getActivity. That will give us an intent that will launch an activity. It's kind of like you said if you were to say on an activity or call start activity. Okay, your call start activity, that's the kind of intent you would use. So this can be an explicit intent, this can be an implicit intent, either way. But if I want the end result of you tapping on the notification to be start an activity, then we're going to call get activity to get that pending intent. If we want it to fire something to a broadcast receiver, we're going to say get broadcast. If we wanted it to start up a service, which is kind of 7.4, we skipped over that. So you're in this class, we're really not going to use this method here. But that would give us a pending intent that would allow us to start a service. As far as what we do in this course, we will do a little bit with this pending intent.get broadcast. I think that's actually part of your lab as well for both 8.1 and 8.3. But you'll definitely want to, the primary one that we use is going to be this pending intent get activity. Usually when you tap on a notification, that's going to start an activity. Not always, but usually. So usually what you're going to see, the content intent is going to be an activity, but sometimes those action buttons instead will be broadcasts instead of starting activities. Okay. So to create a pending intent, we always, regardless of which of those three methods we call, we need to provide it an application context. So if you're in an activity, remember that's just going to be this. If you're in a broadcast receiver, again, it's just this because a broadcast, it's going to be in a context object. And then services, would be this as well. So we need to provide it the context. We need to provide it a request code. This is kind of like, remember we said start activity for result. You can think of that request code as the same thing as start activity for result. It's just a number that we use and we can look at once we tap on that notification. We can see what the request code was. Then third thing we need is the intent, the actual intent that we want the user to invoke when that occurs. And then the fourth piece, which is really the new piece and the part that kind of gets people confused a little bit sometime, is these flags. Okay, so we'll walk through in a minute what some of these flags are. There's an awful lot of different flags, but typically it's going to be one of two things. Okay, but that changes how the intent works, especially if we fire the same notification multiple times. Or if the user taps one of these, say, reply buttons multiple times, what do we want it to do? Okay, so first thing we need to do is create the intent. In order to get a pending intent, I first have to have a regular intent. So let's say I want, when the user taps on the notification, I just wanted it to open up main activity. So I'd say, let's create a new intent. Let's give it the application context. Let's give it main activity class. So if I were to just say start activity with this, well, obviously we'd just be opening up main activity. But I'm going to take this intent and I'm going to wrap it in a pending intent. So I'm going to say pending intent.get activity. I'm going to supply it the application context. I'm going to supply this notification ID constant. In this case, let's just say that's 0. That constant isn't really all that important most of the time, but there does have to be a number there for the request code per se. And then thirdly, we have that intent. So we're saying pending activity, get activity. That's giving us this pending intent. And then the fourth thing we have here is flag update current. That's typically, if you're sending a notification out, you're typically going to say flag update current. So that just says whatever, if there is a previous notification effectively out there, then I'm going to replace it with the notification here that I just created. So the tap action is going to change to whatever I just said that it was, rather than being what the previous notification said the intent was. So this is most of the time, if you're creating a pending intent, it's going to be flag update current. The other one that you'll see occasionally, and is in the lab, is you're going to see flag one shot. Flag one shot says I only want this to happen once. So flag one shot we're typically going to use with any of those action buttons. So your regular tap action, your content, will typically be flag update current, but any action buttons then you have beneath will usually be flag one shot instead. So to assign that pending intent, now that we've said, okay, we created the intent, that was step one. We then created this we created the intent, we created the pending intent wrapper. Now we're going to say builder.setContent intent. So that's going to give it, here's the action that you want to do when the user taps on the notification. You should always give your notifications a content intent. They should always have something that happens when they tap on that notification. Part of that is that notification only shows them a limited amount of text. It may only show them, say, 24. It may only show them the first 40 characters of your text. So if that's all that they can see, or the first 20 characters of their text, that's all they can see, they may not have that whole content. So when they click on that notification, they need to be taken to a screen where they can see the whole content of kind of what was in that notification or what the notification is telling them about. So it's really important that there always is a content intent, and it's really important that that then takes them to a screen where it's easily visible. You know, here's the new content that they're going to see. So if you're telling them about, say on Yelp, you're telling them about a new restaurant that opened, you definitely want that content intent to take them directly to the information about that new restaurant. You don't want it to just take them to the homepage where they're searching for restaurants. You want to take them directly to the page for that restaurant. Or you're saying, hey, here's the top 10 restaurants for this week. Well, you want to go show them that. You don't want to just take them back to the main activity. So to add these buttons, say we want to add the reply button, we're going to say add action. Similar to how we said content intent, we're going to say add action. We need to give it an icon, and then we need to give it some text, and then our pending intent that it's actually going to fire when they tap that icon. Okay, so this icon is always required. Newer versions of Android don't show that icon, but you still are required to include it either way. So we need an icon for each of our action buttons. We need some text. Again, this is user visible, so I really would recommend calling getString here, pulling it from your strings XML rather than hard coding it directly. And then the pending intent, you're basically going to create kind of the same way that we created the regular content intent. But remember that typically that's going to be flag one shot instead of flag update current. Okay. All right, so we've talked about how to create these notifications in general, how to set the actions. The next thing we want to talk about is how to change how the notifications look. I think we're about 1:35. Now's a good time to take a quick break, take a quick bathroom break, give everybody a chance to breathe, give everybody a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to kind of pause here. If you have any questions up at this point, be free to ask them on the YouTube chat. But I'll be back in, say, 15 minutes, and we'll start back up at 1:50. And I'll go with any questions that people have at that point, as well as then moving on with notification style. So we'll resume at 1:50. I'll see you then. Okay, so I'm going to answer what questions are out here. We were talking about the video quality. If you have any issues with the video quality, please let me know. We can try to troubleshoot that for our next live stream to kind of figure out what's there. In theory, I'm hoping that the recording that I post later today will be at least a higher quality than the video, than the stream, so that may help some, but we'll see. I don't know if I got all the settings right for that. So Graham, you'd asked a question about, well, okay, so we've kind of started talking about notifications. Maybe, well, how do I do this if the app isn't running, or if the user isn't currently in the app? So with what we've covered so far, we haven't really talked about how to deal with that. We've talked a little bit about with what we did in lesson 7. We talked about how to use, say, the async task and your async task loader, and maybe a little bit about volley, about how to do things in the background. And that actually is part of the solution to make notifications go out when the app isn't running. That's part of the system, especially because most notifications also require a network call in order for us to know that there's new data for the user to see. So what we're covering in lesson 8.1 will not go over how to send notifications if the user isn't using your app. Okay, so what we're going through in these slides and what we're going through, what the labs will take you through in 8.1, you'll only be really sending notifications as long as the user is in your app. Okay, so that's where we need to get into. When we get into lesson 8.3, 8.3 is where we're going to talk about setting up things that happen when the user isn't using our application. So the job scheduler, which we talk about in 8.3, is going to be the magic key that makes us able to now send out notifications when the user isn't using our app. So the job scheduler lets us do things where we can say, well, every hour, go look for new posts on Facebook. Or every 30 seconds, check to see if there's a new post in your chat room. So that job scheduler, which we're going to talk about in 8.3, is really an important part of actually sending out notifications in general. So we usually don't just use what we're talking about in 8.1 by itself. It's usually in combination with the job scheduler, which we'll talk about in 8.3, as well as the async tasks or the async task loader that we talked about in in lesson 7, in those kind of pieces. So does that kind of make sense? Explain where we're at with that? Again, the lab that we do today is just going to be within that same thing, but it's because you need some additional pieces to be able to send things from the background. Okay. So coming back here, talking about how to send notifications, we've talked about how to create the channels. We've talked about how to start building the notifications out. And we're going to talk, and we just talked about how to make it actually do things when the user taps on the notification. Whether that be the content intent, which is the main thing that happens, or the additional action buttons that you might put in there sometimes. The next thing we want to look at is something called notification styles. So historically, we weren't actually, anytime a notification pops up, it always had a specific styling. It was always that icon plus the title text plus the body text. Those are the only three things you could put into a notification, and it would always look that way for the most part. With notification styles, what's changed is now when you pull the notification drawer down, this doesn't show up when it pops up on screen, but when you pull the notification drawer down, it can now look different. We can show some additional data in there. Now, this doesn't give us full flexibility to just put a layout file out there and put anything we want, any sort of GUI we want. It's still pretty restricted, but it gives us some additional ways to show that notification. So this falls into something we call expanded notifications, which were introduced in Android 4.1. Okay. So with Android 4.1, we've got these expanded views where we can show more things in the notification drawer. Okay, we want to use them sparingly because they do take up a lot of space. They do take extra attention. So we need a justified reason to do this. But there are places where this makes sense. So one kind of expanded notification that we can show is, first of all, is the big text notification. So we've got these notifications where we have more text than maybe 40 characters, which is what we're kind of limited to when we regularly send a notification. So if I use a big text, then I can show like the entire content of an email in that notification rather than just maybe the first 20, 40 characters of that notification. So that can be really helpful to show additional text. This is probably, of all the different expanded styles, this is honestly probably the most useful one because there's plenty of places where you find that you need to show some additional text, whether it be showing somebody's comment or a message that you got from somebody. There's a lot of things like that where your message text is probably not going to fit into 40 characters. So that can be really helpful. The next style that we have is the big image style. So that allows us not just to have something like this, but it allows us to have something bigger here where you can actually show an image with it. So you might use this for, like they show here, if you're capturing a screenshot. Android shows a bigger one like this. If the user's taking a picture with their camera of some sort, anything like that might be a picture, you might need to put a picture in there. That's where you would see this big image style. I know that Amazon, I think, currently uses this for when like a package is dropped off at your door. They'll take a snapshot, a picture of that, and that'll come through then to you as a big image notification with the picture of the package on your doorstep. So that's can be quite useful. But I definitely would say the big text style gets used a lot more than the big image style. Next up is the media style. This is specifically used for media playback. Audio primarily, you can use it for video as well. But this is if you need a pause, play, next track, previous track, things like that. That gives you these additional media playback buttons in the notification. So you can't. So it normally, if you tap on the notification, it'll go back into your media player where you can see the item, you can see whatever's playing. But this gives you a way to kind of do those media controls from a notification. Which, if you're doing media app of any sort, you should definitely use that media style. But outside of having a media app, these aren't all that necessarily useful. That being said, most apps, I'd say nowadays, at some point have a video player in there, even if it's just something from YouTube. But a lot of apps nowadays do include video content somewhere. But that's what you want to use anytime the user's kind of playing video or audio. That gives them a way to control it from the notification. Okay, so to set any of these styles, we need to, on the builder, we need to call the set style method, and that'll give it the style object that we created. So for instance, if we want it to be a big picture style, I'm going to say builder.setStyle, and I'm going to say notificationcompat.bigPictureStyle. So that's going to put it in that big picture style. If I want it to be in the big text style, I would say big text style here. So you just swap that out based on what kind of style you want to do. If you don't call set style, it's just going to be in that normal style, which is going to be the most common case. Once you created that big picture style, you also typically need to call methods on that style to provide some additional information. So for instance, with a big picture style, obviously you need to provide a picture for it to show. So we're going to call .bigPicture and provided a picture resource of some sort. And now note, this big picture method is not being called on the builder. It's actually being called on this style object. That's kind of important. So you'll notice that here's the beginning parenthesis and here's the ending parenthesis of set style. This part all here, from here down to that, is really us creating the style. Okay, you could have done that in separate lines. Typically, we kind of do that all in one line. And that's what the labs will have you do. So if I want the big picture style, I can set all the properties I need there. I can also do the same thing with the big text style. All right, so now that we've created the notification, and now we created the channels, we need to actually deliver those notifications to the user. Now, to deliver notifications to the user, I need a notification manager object. Okay, so that notification manager object is what I'm going to actually be able to use to deliver notifications to the user. I'll be able to cancel them in a minute, and we'll also talk about that's also how you update them should you need to. So to get that notification manager object, it's actually another system service, and we've run into a few system services already. Like one of them was your IME for hiding the soft keyboard. Remember, all of these we call get system service. We're going to pass in some sort of constant, so this is a string. We're going to say get system service notification service, and then downcast that to a notification manager. So that's how we get the notification manager object. It's just another system service that we have to ask for. Now, just a reminder, in order for us to call get system service is called on a context. So you have to be, this code has to be in some place where you have a context that you can call get system service on. As long as you're writing this code into an activity, that's easy because you are a context, so you can just directly call it like this. But if you're in some other class somewhere else, you're going to have to say context.getSystemService. So that's how we get the notification manager object. We just say get system service. You can kind of see notify manager just from the name. You can kind of guess we're probably saving it to a member variable. Once you start using notifications, you're probably going to use this notification manager object pretty often. So it's worth saving it, going ahead and saving it to a member variable so you don't have to retrieve it every time you need to do something with notifications. So typically in your on create, you're probably going to see a line like this. Okay. So once we've gotten that notification manager, we're then going to call notify to actually send the notification out. So that notify method takes two things. It takes first the ID of the notification, okay, and then it takes the actual notification object. Now, remember up until this point, we've been using notification compat.builder. That is actually not a notification object, but it is a builder for a notification object. So actually, to get the notification object, I'm going to say builder.build. So this will take me from a notification builder down to an actual notification compat object, which is where I send that out. So that's effectively the last step of sending out the notification. So we create the channel, we create the notification object, and then we actually tell the notification manager to send it out, to deliver it. So this notification ID, that's something that you're gonna want that as a constant. Notification ID is an integer. Remember, your channel ID is a string, your notification ID is an integer. Your notification ID is used for if you later need to post kind of the same notification, that will mean that it gets updated. So if you want the user to see different notifications or 3 different notifications, those would need to have 3 different IDs. If I use the same ID, it'll just replace the previous notification that's out there. Usually that's what you want. Usually you're going to have really just a very small number of notifications that you show to the user, which in the case of 8.1 and 8.3, both of those really only ever are showing the user 1 notification at a time, which is kind of normal for a lot of apps. If you have 3 notifications showing up in your app bar from a single app, that's kind of the limit. You don't want a bunch of notifications from the same app. So that's how you do that. You're going to have that notification ID, and then you're going to pass in the notification builder. You're going to go build on that. Okay, so that's all we have to do really to deliver a notification. Once we built it, we just say let's go grab the notification manager object, and then let's go call notify, and as soon as we call notify, it's up on the user status bar, they see it. So we also may want to manage these notifications. So to manage these notifications, I can also use I'm also going to use the notification manager. So if I want to update the notification, I want to put some extra or change the content there. Maybe it's a notification about the most recent chat message that somebody's posted in the chat room, in which case maybe I only want to show the last one. Well, then I'm going to, every time a new message is posted, I'm going to update the previous one. So I'm going to update the previous one. I'm going to create a new notification object, and I'm going to call notify, but I'm going to pass that same ID. So if I say my message for, I'm building a chat app, the most recent message that's posted, that's ID 52. Well, if I post a new notification with notification ID 52, that's going to replace whatever one's already there. So if the previous notification was visible, it's going to replace it with the new content. If the notification already been dismissed by the user, whether by swiping it or tapping on it, then it's actually going to re-show that notification. So it'll already take care of those two cases for you. So is there a way to group notifications that are from the same app? An example would be the way notifications are grouped for messaging applications. So for messaging applications, let's say you want to show the last 5 messages that the user has received from some sort of chat room or something like that. The way to actually do that, there are a bunch of those expanded styles. We haven't actually talked about all of them. And one of those is sort of a mailbox / messaging one. So you'd actually, what I would do is use that expanded style that's actually designed for that to group those recent messages together. So there's an expanded style that would cover that. But it would still be one notification rather than being, say, your 5 recent messages would still be one notification rather than 5 notifications. Does that answer what you were asking, Evan? Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's just an expanded style. That's basically the gist of it. So to update notifications, we just post a new notification with the same ID, and that will just replace it. If I want to, say, cancel a notification, then I'm going to use the notification manager. And I'm either going to call cancel or I'm going to call cancel all. If I say cancel, then that only cancels that one notification with that ID. If I say cancel all, I'm canceling every notification that my app has sent out. So that'd be all of them. The user can also cancel the notifications themselves, so they can either swipe to the left or right to dismiss it, or they can hit the clear all button to dismiss all of the notifications. So let's look at from the user. So I'm going to create a notification here. That's what it looks like when the notification pops up. If I want to then pull down the notification drawer, I can dismiss it by sliding to the side. So the user can do that. Or I could hit go in here and you'll see this clear all button. So this clear all button will clear all of the notifications for any apps on the device. So I'm going to go ahead and clear all. So that means that that's all gone. So the user can do either of those things to dismiss the notification. Mainly the side swipe or the clear all, that's going to be if they don't want to do anything with it. The other side of things, let's go out here, and if I tap on the notification, typically the user's expectation is that we'll go through that content intent, we'll do what's kind of expected, and then the notification will dismiss itself. So if I do that here, I'm going to click on that notification, it'll bring me back into the app, and you'll notice that the notification is gone. So in order to enable that behavior, we set auto cancel true on the builder. So we tell it that notification object is set to auto cancel, which means when you tap on it, then it automatically goes away. Rather than if we don't set auto cancel to true, which is the default, if we just leave it false, when the user taps on the notification, actually the notification will still stay there. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we typically do. We typically want that notification to disappear when they tap on it. But if you just leave it as is, that won't happen. So that's the other way that they can get dismissed, is through setting the auto cancel. Okay. So the user can dismiss it using one of those two options. It can get auto dismissed when they tap on it, or we can cancel it manually. Usually the way the notifications get canceled is going to be through them tapping on it and going into the app. So general design guidelines for notifications. If you're going to use notifications, you really want, the whole goal is to kind of draw the user into your app even when they're not using it, to let them know that there's new data or new things happening. you're really trying to reach out to the user, but you want to be careful that you don't send too many, because if you send too many notifications, the user's going to do one of the two things. They're either going to turn off all the notifications on your app, or they're going to completely uninstall it. Both of those things are not desirable. Them turning on notifications means that now in the future you can't send them anything. And it means that, again, as I was kind of saying at the beginning of this, if they turn off notifications, they don't know your app's installed. They've forgotten that you exist, potentially. How long it is between them forgetting that you exist and them uninstalling it is, maybe you could be a while. But effectively, they're not getting usage out of your app, and but they're still kind of quote unquote using your resources. So you want to really avoid that, and you really don't want them obviously uninstalling your app because they decided that your app's they don't want your app. You don't want these things to happen. So you want to make sure that when you are sending out notifications, you want to make sure they're relevant. So whatever you're sending out in notifications should be stuff that the user actually cares about. You don't want to send out notifications if the user is probably just going to dismiss it 90% of the time, and they maybe don't care that it's happening. So one way to ensure that is, the more you do to kind of determine what the user is interested in, or having the user actually do some things in the app to say, okay, well, they like pictures about cats. We'll send them notifications about cats. Maybe not, not just randomly saying, oh, okay, well, most people like dogs, so we're going to send everybody pictures about dogs. Probably not a good approach. So you want to kind of figure out, the more you have the user kind of pick what they're interested in up ahead of time before they even send out the notifications, the more likely that those are going to be relevant. Timeliness is also very important. So they need to appear when they're useful. If you say, okay, I'm going to post if I'm going to say, well, we'll only post, let's say, we're in a chat room, we're going to post message notifications about new messages, but we're only going to post them a day after they're posted. Well, I probably don't want to know about the most messages that were posted in my chat room, whether it be my Discord or Slack channel, wherever, about them yesterday. I probably want to know about those right when they happen. Now, there's some exceptions to that rule, but most of the time, the user is going to want to know pretty close to when it happens. That's when the notification would be expected. If you wait too long, then they lose their worth. And it's also really, really important that all of those notifications that you send out, the text is very short. You only really have a very short time to get their attention, and recognize that the amount of text that actually shows up in that notification is only 20 to 40 characters. So if it's longer than that, they're not going to see it. They're not going to be able to read it. They may not be able to pay attention to it. So keep it short. You're distracting them. Anytime you send out a notification, you're distracting them from something else potentially that they're doing. So don't send out too many, and make sure that when you do, that you have that information as concise as possible. So one of the things that means in terms of keeping it short, if you can make the text of the notification something that's predefined, that you define, that's usually best. Having the user posting the user's message in there, it can be okay, but you're wanting to make sure that you use a big text style if it's user written text. Otherwise, there just simply won't be enough space. And then also make sure that you give the users the power to choose what things they want to get. So make sure that you split up your notifications into different notification channels so that they can turn on and off different kinds of notification based on what kind of usage and what kind of things they care about. Again, some users may care about certain kinds of your notifications, some of your notifications, and other users won't care about those at all. So give them the power to have kind of fine-grained control over all of your notifications. That means that they're less likely to turn them all off. It means they're more likely to turn off just the few that they're getting annoyed by, rather than turning them all off. So that's kind of the outlook there. You can read more about this in the 8.1 chapter, the concepts chapter. And you can also then start on the practical, the code labs for 8.1, which will kind of put to practice this into practice. Looking very briefly at Android Studio, just to kind of walk through some of this with a quick code example to kind of see where things go. Typically, your code to create the channel might look something like this. It's something that to create the notification channel, you're typically going to want to break it off into a separate method. And typically then you're going to call that method that creates the channel, you're going to call that from in on create. So that's kind of going to be your starting point. So main activity on create calls this method to create the notification channel. So again, you need the service, you create the notification channel object, and then you may do some configuration like we've done here, which is configuring the lights, the color of the light, the vibration, and setting the description of that channel. And then finally calling create notification channel. So that's step one that you're going to usually call from on create. The other part where you send the notification is typically going to be fired at a later time, whether it's from your job scheduler or an async task or from Volley or from, in this case, we're clicking on a button. So in this case, we'll create the channel when the application starts, and then we send the notification when the user clicks on the Notify Me button. So you're going to typically see those things in two different places. So if you want to kind of review on that, again, I would recommend going through the lab, and then you can kind of pull down my finished version of the Notify Me app if you have any kind of gotchas in there. That's where I would kind of recommend you go at this point. Looking into, let me open up the code lab here. Other bookmarks, Android. So looking into 8.1. So as far as what you want to do with 8.1, there's the app that you're going to be building. I want you to go through all the tasks. The coding challenge is worth doing as well. So I want you to go through that. It may not be so obvious how to do some of this stuff. The completed project I posted for Notify Me actually has the code for the coding challenge in there too, so you can look at how I did that. Because it's maybe a little bit of a jump from what we've covered here to just kind of review. Because part of that, in order to make this work, I think I had to use a broadcast receiver or some sort to make this happen. Which isn't entirely obvious if you're just reading through it. It's not a broadcast receiver. It is you want to get notified about when the user dismisses the app. So one of the things that we can do, we can provide an intent for what we want it to do when the user taps on the action. We can also provide an intent for what we need to do if the user just dismisses the action without actually interacting with it. So that's kind of what's happening there. So I want you to go through the tasks and then the coding challenge. I'm not actually going to ask you to do the homework assignment here, the homework lab, for either 8.1 or 8.3. I've got some additional labs that I'd rather have you spend time on rather than the homework labs that they've given you for 8.1 or 8.3. Okay, so again, you go through the task and the coding challenge, but skip the homework. The homework questions, though, those are posted on Inside Rank, and they do want you to go through those. But the actual Notify app that they're asking you here to do, you don't need to do. This inbox style, actually, that's the one I was talking about for messages, Evan. So that's the style that you would be using. So anyway, when you finish up the labs for 8.1, what I want you to get started on this week, go to the course. There we go. Additional labs for 8 for Unit 3. So if we're looking at that, there's an attachment associated with this assignment. It's called Volley Labs. All of these are using Volley. We're kind of touch on some of it right now. Volley's not really that hard to use. I know some of you have started using it already, but I definitely want to get you guys more familiarity with it. Now, there's a few labs in here because I kind of pulled this from last year. I'm not actually asking you to do all of these labs right now. There's only 3 labs I want you to do this week. So the 3 labs I want you to do this week are Magic 8 Ball, the Fortune Cookie, and then Chatterbox. Those are the 3 that I want you to do this week, and those are listed on Inside Rankin. So those are the 3 I want you to do. We've talked about how to do some of that already, so you have the tools in hand to already finish up the Magic 8 Ball. So definitely I would say get started on that at some point tomorrow once you finish the regular code labs. So definitely get started on that Magic 8 Ball tomorrow. And then the other 2, the Fortune Cookie and Chatterbox, you'll need some of the stuff that we'll talk about on Wednesday to complete those. So does that make sense? Questions? If anything more comes up, you get into a bit of a snag, just message me on Discord. I'll be here basically the rest of the day, as well as I'll be here tomorrow. I'll be here on Discord even outside of class time. So if you need to get in touch with me anytime between 8 and 9 a.m. until like 5 or 6 p.m., I'll be on there. And even after that, I'll have my phone. I've got Discord on my phone, so if you need to get in touch with me outside of hours, just message me, direct message me on Discord, and I'll see it. Yep. So if you have any questions on labs, just message me on Discord, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Just a reminder, I did post this on Discord. Make sure you do a poll on your repos because I pushed out espresso tests for hands-on test 3, as well as some changes for your get ignore. So if you just try to do a push right now without doing that pull, it's going to give you an error because there's going to say, hey, there's changes out there that you haven't pulled down yet. So make sure you do a pull before you do a push. Yeah, I've got those tests graded. I've posted the grades on Inside Rankin, but I need to scan them. I've got them behind me, so I just need to scan them in, and I'll post the scans onto Inside Rankin. Okay. So with that being said, I'm gonna end the stream here. I'll get the recording posted, and then I'll be on Discord should you have any questions about the labs. All right. Other than that, have a great day.